So we went to Japan. We spoke to people like Panasonic and Sony and those guys, and we're like, what do you think of this algorithm? And we struck out. The valuation at the time was 20 million New Zealand with absolutely nothing. We had nothing behind us. We just had this really impressive demo. I think a lot of good success, there's always a little bit of luck involved. One of our biggest barriers at the beginning was that most DJs didn't own a computer. And so getting them to get a laptop in the first place, and then let alone trust their set to a piece of technology was one of the big barriers.
Is there any moment in time that you've gone, maybe we've created a bit of a monster here?
We're not killing vinyl, we're saving the turntable. Politics is divisive these days, and we've got echo chambers, and we've got people throwing their hands in the air about all sorts of moral panics. And we want to be the reasoned voice in the room. There is no future if people can't afford to live. One of our biggest problems in New Zealand is that.
Coming up, AJ Wilderland, founder of Serato, just in the press, $100 million US exit, just happened in the last few weeks or so. And off the back end of a cancelled deal by the Overseas Investment Office and the Comcom around about a year ago. We go deep on that subject. We talk about building the business. We talk about his move into the political sphere and what the Opportunities Party is trying to achieve, and also how he puts his money where his mouth is, literally living into his values. So great guy, great conversation. Enjoy. AJ Wilderland, co-founder of Serato. So great to have you on the show. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Hey, so exiting Serato operationally around about 10 years ago as you moved off the executive leadership team. And so now you've moved into politics. So was it that you were not getting invited to enough parties anymore and you thought, what I need to do is to go into politics?
Well, first of all, regarding the exit, it's actually a partial exit. Yeah. I've only sold about a third of my shares. And in terms of stepping back from day-to-day operations, that was actually about 19 years ago. I did step in briefly 10 years ago for a couple of years, but yeah, it's been quite a while that I've managed to be able to step back and run it from the boardroom.
Yes.
But to your actual question, politics, nobody in their right mind wants to be in politics, but for me, it's more of a calling. I don't want to get involved in the politics of politics, but I do want to help get New Zealand back on track. And I think that we are, along with the rest of the world, not addressing the really important things, the things that most New Zealanders are struggling with. So that's why I'm there.
There's three great leads for me there, of which I will pick all of them up as the conversation goes. But another potentially provocative question for you. DJ software to politics. Are you trying to solve the world's problems or remix them?
Well, look, I think that I'm a problem solver. Like it used to be on my school reports when I was a kid, great problem solver. And for me, difficult problems are what keep my mind engaged. I'm very ADHD. So, continuing to do the same thing every day would never work for me. I can't even make myself do things that I'm not interested in. But what I am interested in is figuring out solutions, creating systems that work, and making life more smooth. So, I'm in a similar way at home. I'm like reorganizing my pantry and labeling things and that kind of stuff. It's about making life work better. And in the area of, New Zealand economics or politics in general, there's a lot broken. And so why not take on the biggest problem and do it locally at home?
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm looking forward to that part of the conversation. Let's go back to the start, however.
Sure.
So Serato, DJ software, immensely cool product, a very loyal customer, by the way. I resisted the temptation and the pull to go into Rekordbox and others. I don't believe that's had any influence on your company's success over time, but I thought I'd throw that out there. Yeah. So the founding story is back in university days from what our researcher has dug up.
Yeah, so the founders, which are myself and Steve West, we met at university. We were both what they called lab demonstrators in the computer science department. What that meant is that for a few bucks a week, we would go in there, help people with their homework, and when everyone was happy, we'd sit down at a computer and we'd start, doing stuff that was interesting to us. And we just became good friends through a mutual interest in interesting problem solving in computer science. And so what happened was, and to be clear, we didn't actually start in the DJ thing. That came a little later. We've always been in audio. Steve showed me this algorithm he'd been working on, which allowed you to change the speed of music or speech or any audio really without its pitch changing. So instead of going deeper when you go slower and all of that kind of stuff, it would recreate the audio as if it was recorded at a different speed. And this was kind of revolutionary at the time. There were other pieces of software that did the job, but really badly, and nothing like this. So yeah, we started out trying to find a home for this algorithm of his. And I got my dad involved, who had, some experience in international marketing, and his mum was involved already, and she was a chartered accountant. So between the four of us, we founded Serato, and we tried to come up with who would want this thing. And we kind of thought it would be ubiquitous. We thought it would be in everything, and, from CD players to DVD players and that kind of thing. This is obviously before digital completely took over. And so we went to Japan. We spoke to people like Panasonic and Sony and those guys, and we're like, what do you think of this algorithm? And we struck out everywhere. They all found it very interesting, but we learned at some point that particularly Japanese companies, they like to own their own technology. And there's this acronym NIH for not invented here. You've heard that one? So we ran into NIH, and we were kind of at the end of one of the tours, and I wasn't on it. And Steve and my father met this guy from Sony Pictures Studio, and he heard the demonstration. He was gobsmacked, and he said, I need this for the project I'm working on right now. I need this every day, but I need it as a plugin for Pro Tools. Pro Tools, of course, is a recording studio piece of software. It was, the big one back then that took over from reel-to-reel tape decks, which is what studios, had always ran on in the past. And so they were the behemoth of recording studio software. And so for us to get this product out, we figured out we needed to learn how to write a Pro Tools plugin. So we had to go and see the company that made Pro Tools and asked to be a development partner. And of course, they were very they were the big G's, and so they said things like, well, we only accept about 1 in 100 applications, and it takes about 3 weeks to give you a result. So let's hear it, and we'll go from there. So we do the demonstration, and then they were pretty much falling over themselves to get us to sign, and not lose us to some other platform, because it was really super wanted and needed in the industry. And we basically got home from that meeting and started hacking away, and took it to a trade show, and same thing, same reception. Producers and people that ran, what do you call them, musical instrument stores and all that were gobsmacked, and everyone was trying to figure out how they could get it like tomorrow. And so it was beta at the time, so it kind of worked, and we needed another 3 months after that trade show to actually get it to a point that we would give it to people. And that was the beginning. We delivered our software digitally, which was pretty unheard of at the time. There was not much e-commerce in the year 2000, yeah, the money started to roll in. We had just about run out of our seed capital,
which was probably quite small.
It was not too bad, to be fair, but we ran on it. It was $300K.
Okay, right.
And
on courses.
Well, my father had sold an option to invest in the company, and the investor had not taken up the option.
Can you explain how that mechanism works, by the way?
Yeah, sure. So it was basically a limited time offer to buy into our company at a fixed valuation. And the valuation at the time was 20 million New Zealand with absolutely nothing. We had nothing behind us. We just had this really impressive demo. And at the end of the month, they, the time period, they decided that they weren't going to.
This is a prospective investor.
Yeah, but we already had the $300K.
Right.
So we basically lived on that for a year, which got us overseas, got us, it kept me and Steve eating noodles for a year. And by the time January 2000 came around, we had orders rolling in. Yes. So we managed to bootstrap from that.
Yeah. So if I go back to the start of this conversation, you mentioned being a problem-oriented guy. You really love solving problems, creating systemic solutions to problems so they can be resolved over and over again. And so knowing what you know now about yourself, but also the way that the business works, and correct me if I'm wrong, you had an amazing solution, a product, or an idea where you had a solution in a product, and you went overseas with this idea of being, this is going to be amazing and it's going to knock people's socks off. Do you think that you were disconnected with the problem that thing could truly solve, or was it much more niche than you anticipated originally?
Well, so like all good things of this nature, it came about to solve a specific problem that Steve had. So he was a bass guitarist, and he wanted to learn how to play bass licks from music from the radio. And the problem with bass is that if you slow down bass, it goes subsonic and you can't hear it at all.
Huh.
So he wanted a way to slow down music so that he could hear the bass still, but it was half speed or less, so that he could carefully learn it. And so he was solving a problem that he had, and I think that's always a really great way to start a company. And then we tried to expand the idea of what problem it would solve, and we got it wrong. We thought, the CD player manufacturers would want it for home audio, and they didn't. But then we stumbled on the place where the problem was. And so this problem that they were trying to solve was, there was different versions. There was, for example, George Michael's producer contacted us before it was for sale, and he absolutely needed it because George Michael had recorded a symphony orchestra and it was the wrong BPM. And so getting that orchestra in again to do the whole thing 5 BPM slower or faster was going to cost a lot of money. And our algorithm was so good that particularly music like that, strings and things, it excelled at. It was just a no-brainer for them. And so slightly adjusting the tempo of stuff that's been recorded and would be difficult to record again was one of the issues. The other people that used it a lot were people squeezing audio into ad spots. When you do an ad, it's got to be 30 seconds exactly, or whatever is the requirement. And so if it's 32 seconds, instead of recording it again, you just compress it slightly. Yeah. And movies. So the guy that we originally got redirected into Pro Tools by is a guy who was doing DVD conversions. So, back in those days, Europe and New Zealand and other places were using a standard called PAL, which is 25 frames a second, and America was using 30 frames a second. And 30 is easy to convert from film, which is 24, because the ratio is not too bad, but going from 24 to 25 frames a second, you can't just throw away a few frames or anything like that. It actually, what they do is they slow everything down by 4%. They speed everything up by about 4%. And it turns out that musicals and things like that, where they're singing in key, the singers and things weren't very happy with the PAL version of their thing going out a different pitch. So for them, it was a daily, use product where all they were doing was, adjusting an entire movie soundtrack to fit into a different frame rate. And so there was a few problems we didn't know, but luckily what we found was that there was a place where all those problems were trying to get solved, and that was this platform.
Yeah, got it. So Peter Beck had been launching rockets from his backyard, and he decided that he needed to get in the industry proper. Flew to the States, arranged meetings with Lockheed Martin, NASA, etc., some of the other space manufacturing kind of businesses, and he struggled to have get any credibility because he had no credentials, no university education and no money to back up what he was doing. And so there was a moment in time where he very nearly didn't become Sir Peter Beck of Rocket Lab and disappeared. And it was despondence based upon effort that he'd put in, not resulting in an outcome. It sounds like from that story, it's always the last stone that we unturn that produces something. Yeah. But did you rub up against that? Were you really pushing hard and going, is this thing actually going to fly at any stage?
Well, it all happened pretty quickly, luckily for us. So I think that last meeting and someone had suggested this meeting. This wasn't something that we had figured out that we were going to do because, we kind of went down the list of Sonys and Panasonics and things. Someone during our travels had said, go and see, this guy at Sony Pictures. I don't know why, but they did. And so I think a lot of good success, there's always a little bit of luck involved. Yeah. And so that was one thing. I think if we had come back from all of those trips and with no interest from any of the hardware companies and not knowing where to go next, there might have been a bit of that, but we were lucky enough that it just all flowed.
Yeah. Seneca, I believe, said that luck is when preparedness and opportunity meet. Mm-hmm. And so in this instance, you'd done the preparation and the work, and it just happened to be that was the stone that produced the opportunity.
Yeah.
So 20 million as a valuation for a company with an algorithm, this is like Silicon Valley, the television show-esque. We've got this compression algorithm. It's incredible, not dissimilar, in fact, in some ways. Yeah. How did you conjure up 20 million as a number?
Look, my dad is a salesman. His first thing he was doing was selling encyclopedias door to door. He's just always been a salesman, and so that was him. And Steve and I wouldn't have.
Let's go high. We can always
let's
come
go
down.
high. And I think we could see the potential in this thing. It did seem, earth shattering to us. For the niche that it found its way into, it was. And it's just ballsy kind of. And look, if they had done that back then, invested at that rate, they would be getting a pretty good return right now. So
yeah, nudging 10x, give or take.
26 years later or something.
Yeah. I mean, investment is not a overnight game. No. Most of them fail. So,
and in some ways, it's actually really good that we've not had outside investors, because we have never had pressure from the money men to do things any particular way. We've just always done what we thought was right, and it's not until just this year that we've had anybody in the shareholding that wasn't family.
Yeah, wow.
Or employees.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you started with a deal with a recording business, and you were a plug-in piece of software.
Mm-hmm.
What were those early couple of years of growth like for you? And then when did you start kind of building into quite a different product suite?
So we were pretty solid for the first few years. Just, I would say, linear growth. When we started to do DJ, that was just another random idea as well. So this actually started for me one Saturday when I was thinking about wanting to scratch records,
Did you DJ up until at that point in time?
No.
Right.
So I'd never had a turntable or a piece of vinyl in my life. And so that was the problem that I was trying to solve. It was like, well, how am I going to scratch today without that stuff? And I was thinking about the way the needle interacts with the vinyl, and the way that becomes an audio waveform, and thinking about the mathematics of it and that kind of thing. And I was like, oh, I could just hack something together. And so a few hours later, on that Saturday afternoon, I had a prototype where you could put a CD into your laptop and you could scratch it with the mouse. And when I took it into work on Monday, everyone had a play with it, and we thought, oh, this would be a fun toy. Maybe we could find a way to sell it for $50. And then we thought, oh, actually, this would be quite useful in the recording studio for adding scratching to recorded tracks, where you don't have to get the thing you want to scratch pressed onto vinyl. You could just do that. And luckily enough, Steve had already worked on a paper at the university for a friend of his, coming up with a way to translate vinyl movements to exactly that information. So replacing the mouse with a real piece of vinyl was kind of like this thing he'd already done, and this thing that this resampling thing that I'd made, putting those together made something that a DJ could use. And so we made another plugin for Pro Tools, and so that was pretty successful. But we knew that DJs using this live would be a really big market compared to that. And so we immediately started working on basically an MP3 player that plays two MP3s at once that connects to turntables. And that was how that was born. And we had to start hiring. So we hired a developer, and and whenever I interview a person for a job, the only question I care about is, what have you created that wasn't for a job and wasn't for an assignment just because you wanted to? And, some of the people said, oh, I don't think I've ever done that. And I was like, okay. And the guy that we hired said, I made an MP3 player. So we're like, you're hired. And, between myself and Steve and Nick, the guy we hired.
Employee number one, other than you two?
No, I think we had an admin person before that. So we were 4 at the time. But, between the three of us, we were building the online forum, which still exists today, written in the language that was popular at the time, PHP. And we have, and we're working on the code for the new product. And so our real sort of birth into proper DJ software was in 2003, when we took our prototype once again to a trade show, this time NAMM in California. And when we the previous year we'd shown our plugin version, and we'd gotten some really interesting high level scratch artists getting very, very excited about what we were doing. And then, the following year we went big and we got our own, a dance floor. And,
cool.
So we basically had this black cube where people could come and listen. And the DJ, it looked like a DJ setup at a club or something, with just up on a stage. Very simple though. And we leaned into the kind of hip hop kind of vibe. And people would come up and we didn't really need to demo the product ourselves. We just showed people how it worked. And then DJs, some famous, some really good, would come up and just play. And so it was pretty cool. And that launched us. And we just organically grew from there. And the first year of that product being out, we was pretty steady. We were kind of doing, 300 units a month kind of thing for about a year. And then it suddenly 10x'd all at once. And there's a famous idea called the 100th monkey. And it's about this experiment they did on an island where if 1% of a population knows something or does something in a certain way or whatever, then it infects everybody and it takes off. And so, I did this really rough calculation. After this happened, I did this really rough calculation to try and figure out the rough size of the market and the number of people who had already, bought into, and it came out to about 1%. So I thought, okay, critical mass. That's what happened. And so then we just took off from there, and we got a lot bigger very quickly based on the DJ side of things versus the studio plugin side of things. And we still sell that plugin today. It still sells 25, 26 years later. But yeah, our main bread and butter is the DJ stuff.
Yeah. I know you was a software company. In those days, were you software selling onto other platforms, other physical hardware platforms, or were you producing hardware as well?
So the first prototype of the DJ software, we built our own interface box. So basically, we wanted to be able to connect a laptop to normal analog gear. And so a vinyl DJ has two analog turntables. They've got an analog mixer, and nothing's digital at all. And so we built a little box, and it's basically, you could think of it as a sound card, and we interrupt. So instead of the turntables going directly into the mixer, the turntables would go into our box, and we would interpret the sounds coming off the vinyl, and then the short cables coming out of our box would go into the mixer. And so our software would replace the sound of our control record with digital audio. And so with one record that just basically has a tone on it to real audio of any song that you happen to have in your library was a bit of a game changer for DJs. Whenever I've bumped into a DJ, like a career DJ, and they've realized who I am, the one thing they always say is that you saved my back. They were carrying, like
massive amounts
kilos,
of records.
Like 30 kilos of records into a club. And moving, and your vinyl was precious. That your collection was such a big part of what you were doing as a DJ, that you would lug this stuff around. And then it actually opened up something called open format DJing, where instead of like sticking to a genre or, like a set of, 100 records or something like that, you could have thousands and thousands of songs spanning across all kinds of genres. And, there were some really big open format DJs that were coming out, and it was big on the scene to be able to just like mix in some rock with some, like whatever kind of dance music or hip hop, and just go bounce around and do some creative stuff. So yeah, it really took off.
Yeah. I think researcher dug up, you'll know these numbers as well, that the company over time had a compound annual growth rate of 35%, which is remarkable over the course of, 25, 27 years, give or take.
Right.
And at the start, it sounds like it was product-led growth, because you found a problem, people connected with that problem, you got to 1%, and that got to the stage of just getting some viral kind of traction in markets. No doubt you had some endorsement from some people that were recognised and had some credibility in that space. Did you ever have to move into like sales or marketing-led growth, or has it always been product-led for you?
Well, we have always done our own marketing. We have a marketing department, but like what I noticed when we were in the early stages is that the other companies were, 60% marketing department and, some amount of admin, but then, maybe 30% development. And we were the other way around. We've always had at least 60% of our company is people either writing or testing code. And it's probably 80% if you include our web team, which is, theoretically part of the marketing department, because that's what, they work together with the marketing department. But in terms of actual development teams, we have mostly developers. And so we've always been a product-led company and user-focused. And I think that's always been really important for us, is we don't want to become marketing led. We just want to do really good marketing, and a lot of our marketing is collaborating with artists and building community. And somebody once told me that what we've done is created a love brand, and it's about not disappointing the fans. It's about trying to give them what they want and need and listen to them. And as you get bigger and bigger, that gets harder and harder because there's a lot more people to listen to. And so our forum is still a very busy place on the internet, but it would be impossible for, our support team to be completely across all of it. And in fact, that was the reason we did it in the first place, is that there was 4 of us, and creating a public forum for support was basically our way of outsourcing and crowdsourcing, the millions of easy questions that get thrown at you when people are newbies.
Yeah.
Then, yeah.
My hypothesis would be, you mentioned that you gave people, your users, customers, what they wanted, and so you probably anticipated what their next need may have been as well, given you saw something which was a problem in an adjacent space and then kind of waded into the DJ space. It was like a great analogy that I always share, never hear, is that I flew on China Southern first class one time in my life, flown first class lines. And I had this experience where on the aircraft, I had to keep on asking for things. And what I understood over time, having had some other business class experiences where in New Zealand for a while it was exceptional at this, you'd walk onto the aircraft and they would treat each person differently depending on how they profiled that person. And so what I understood is that great service is about anticipation. It's about knowing what it is that the customer will need before it is that you've recognized that you've got that problem. And so my suspicion is that you anticipated what the next step may be. Is that because that's innovation essentially? Yeah.
So our big changes, so a lot of our products and product waves, if you like, are things that people didn't know they wanted. Having a vinyl emulation at all was something that we had to educate people that it was a thing that they would want. And one of our biggest barriers at the beginning was that most DJs didn't own a computer. And so getting them to get a laptop in the first place, and then let alone trust their set to a piece of technology was one of the big barriers. But when some of the big names were doing it, it was, it made it a lot easier for others to follow. And then when we went from mostly being about vinyl to creating the design for the first all-in-one controller, which has basically a mixer section and platter sections in one unit that you plug directly into the laptop, and then there's none of this interface and all these wires going everywhere. That was met with some skepticism from the pros, but of course it opened the door for a whole lot of people to become DJs who never would have. Just like not having to get hundreds of pieces of vinyl opened the door to a whole lot of vinyl DJs. This opened the door to a whole lot of non-vinyl DJs and, bedroom DJs and wedding DJs and things like that. And so it just everyone's a photographer now.
Yes.
Everyone can be a DJ.
Yes.
And so technology removes the barriers to entry over time. And there are some people who get upset about that, and understandably so. People who spend 20 years working on a craft that now, you don't need to have to be able to do the thing that they do, albeit not as expertly as they do it, but they can still do it. It's like, if you're a portrait painter, when the camera was invented, it might have been a bit awkward feeling. And so I just feel like that's been happening for a long time. And, when we created a new thing, in a lot of cases, it wasn't something that that people were desperately asking for. It was a new thing. But when I said that thing about giving people what they want, I mean fixing their problems. At the beginning, we had this forum, and people would get on the forum and say, I've found this bug that's really, getting in my way. And then one of the founders or the lead developer would respond to that and say, oh yeah, we found that bug. That's thanks for sharing it with us. We're working on it right away. And people were shocked that we were admitting that there was a bug in our software in public. And, a lot of software development happens behind closed doors, and bug reporting and all that kind of thing is very secretive. I remember at the time, reporting bugs to Apple, and would never get a response to any of my messages. But then, 2 years later, I might get an email saying the bug you reported at such and such a time is no longer able to be reproduced in the latest version. And it's like, they didn't actually admit that they had a bug, but they're just letting me know that this version doesn't have the bug. So I guess that's kind of, you know what I mean? And we were just being very out in the open and transparent about that. And we've been sort of congratulated for being more transparent than your average software company. I think it's more popular now. I think it's just good customer relations to be open and admit your mistakes.
Robert Greene calls it one of the tenets of trust, is to offer something up to people that they may not necessarily know or find out for themselves about you and any shortcomings that you might have. Mm-hmm. And it is a wonderful way to build trust. I completely agree. Talking about people getting access to DJing, and this is not overstating my presence as a DJ because it was a closed stag do, but I was back-to-backing with Timmy Finn. And I'm looking over Timmy's shoulder, and he pushes the dreaded sync button. I'm like, Timmy, what are you doing? And he goes, all the top DJs do it. It's just easier. And that kind of opened up the door to me to go, I can just do that myself as well, because up until that point in time, but let's be honest, moving up and down the tempo is not the hardest thing in the world. It's picking the right track and then picking the right moment to drop it in, right?
That's the talent, isn't it?
That is the talent.
And look, just because you had to do it manually one day, and this is one of the best turntablists in the world, A-Track, he told me that, he uses the sync button because he doesn't need to prove that he can mix two records together. He's been doing it for his whole life. Why, if you're just playing songs, then why do you need to actually do that work? Yeah.
The work is elsewhere, right? The skill should be applied to the real problem that you're solving for, in your parlance. But my question for you is, and so you opened up the door to a myriad of people. And let's be honest, DJing is now cooler than it's ever been. It hasn't actually jumped the shark in any way. And all sorts of people around the world. Paris Hilton might have brought it to the masses, who knows? But do you think that, is there any moment in time that you've gone, maybe we've created a bit of a monster here?
I don't think of it that way, and I never have. I get questions like this sometimes, like back in the day, it was like, oh, don't you think you're going to kill vinyl? And I said, look, we're not killing vinyl, we're saving the turntable. And, to me, I think the thing that people notice when the barrier to entry is lowered is that a lot more people with not as much talent are able to get in and share their version of DJing or whatever the technology happens to enable. And you might get a lot more mediocre stuff out of that. But it also means that there are people who rise to the top with real talent who never would have had the opportunity. And that happens all the time. You get a song that becomes a number one that somebody recorded on GarageBand in their lounge with normal, and when you hear stuff like that, it's like, it is worth it. It's worth it to widen the inputs, because the stuff that's really good still rises to the top, and now we're getting into a world where AI can assist people who don't have skills in many areas to do stuff that they would never have been able to do. And, people are concerned about the wave of slop that the internet is going to get filled up with. And in some ways it's true, but it's also it also creates the opportunity for curation and, finding new and better ways for the stuff that is really good to get filtered out of the noise.
Yeah.
So,
it's essentially kind of democratizing DJing and the putting together of a party and, combining music, I would guess is what the description that best suits my purposes. I've followed a guy called James Hype for 5 years or so now. And he was a guy that was trying to get famous for something and trying to make his mark on the world for something, and began with mixing, DJing, and endeavoring to do a tutorial series based upon his signature 4-deck movements. I don't know if you know James Hype or not. James Hype. So he's worth watching on YouTube to see some of his stuff in terms of his turntablist magician, in terms of what he can do. Quite different to the A-track or crafty cuts kind of skill set, but amazing nonetheless. And so he's got these things where he gets the very cheapest bit of kit, because going back to your point, the early stuff that I was buying was rubbish, and it was several thousands of dollars, 15, 18, 20 years ago, $5,000 for something that was really, really not that good until Serato came along. Now you can buy a really nice little bit of kit for a few $100s. And James gets on those things, and he does these quite unbelievable, application of skills based upon learning on these incredible bits of kit and then kind of dumbing it down to this to show people what's possible. Yeah. And so I think you've kind of been a big part of doing that. Mm. So for my purposes, thank you, and probably no doubt for many others. So you 10x'd when you got to this 1% at a point in time. What was the early days of growth like for you? Because there was 4 of you, but no doubt you had to go to 8 to 16 to 25. What were some of those difficult moments of growth?
Well, and we kind of anticipated some of them. I think in the early days, we were 2 for a while, if you don't count our parents. And then, we were 4 for a while, and then we rapidly grew to 9. And the number that we kind of had in our heads that we wouldn't want a company bigger than was 30. We thought, it's hard to be a family. It's hard to kind of know everyone. And, it feels like you start to get middle management or stuff like that. And fair enough. By the time we kind of were crossing the 30 barrier, I had stepped away from managing because I recognize that my skill set does not include managing. I'm strong in the entrepreneurial vision side of things, and I'm strong in the technical side of things. If it's interesting enough of a problem for me to hyper focus on. But in terms of maintaining and managing and things like that, and also, not rubbing people up the wrong way with my sort of autistic way of, spotting the flaws in what they're doing or whatever it is, like finding someone who could be a great manager meant that transition wasn't too bad. And so what we've kind of learned over time, and then we thought 60 was going to be a barrier, and then we thought 100 was going to be a barrier. And now we're at 160, right? The thing that's really important is culture. And if you've got a place that's great to work at, and you put a lot of attention on what life is like for the people that work in the company, and try to figure out solving their problems, and of course paying them fairly and giving them cool benefits. It's not as common in New Zealand, but it's probably common enough in the tech sector. But I remember introducing free health insurance for staff, and then we introduced a program for a few of the top level people to get share ownership, so that when something like this that just happened took place, they could share in the windfall of big investment.
Yes.
And we've got a great team in the people department trying their best to look after all of our people, and the culture is one of transparency. And if every now and then I try to remind the staff, like if there's something going wrong and you can't talk to your manager about it, go to the next person up and keep going until you get to me, I really believe that looking after your people is important, and so your own people and the customers. And
yeah, I agree.
So there have been those mental barriers to growing the team, and now of course with 160 people, and me not being there day to day, I am always, every time I go in, I'm meeting a person that I've never met before, and it's hard to keep track of everybody.
Does everyone still know who you are when you come into the office?
I don't know. I have to assume that people do, because there's enough going on, and people can look up things, but I don't think it's required. We don't, it's not part of the
indoctrination. I love it. Yeah. Like a flashcard series of you and Steve. Yeah. Who is this guy with a beard, without a beard?
Yeah. I wouldn't be concerned if they didn't know who I was, because I'm not there every day. I try to make it in some Wednesdays, for example.
Right.
But at the moment, my life is incredibly busy with 2 toddlers. So
yes.
Yeah.
And a politics thing we're going to get to in a couple of minutes. So young Lee has been in the business for around 15 years, I think. Is that correct?
That's about right.
Yeah. Been the CEO for about 10 years. Were there any thing that you either did wrong or right early on in the days of transitioning away? You weren't CEO at that stage, I believe. Is that right?
I stepped away from day-to-day operations about a month after my 30th birthday.
Okay.
So quite 19 years ago.
Yeah.
And
That's early, by the way.
Yeah.
What drove that decision?
Well, Steve was still in the company. I had gotten to a point where it felt like things were kind of ticking along, and I just wanted to, I don't know, maybe I probably just wanted to be able to say that I retired at 30. At the time, I was 30 at the time, so like fresh out of the 20s, and it seemed like, but I had big ideas, things that I wanted to do, and so I did that, and it wasn't until I joined the team as CEO again, and young Lee, who was the head of the development department, he was the head of that, of all the development managers and things. We promoted him to COO, so he was doing operations to make up for my shortcomings in the CEO role. And after 2 years of me being CEO with him as COO, we upgraded him to CEO, and I stepped back.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
And he has been doing a great job.
A great pedigree you've got on there. Sam Cribbins went on to found Melodics, which has had a good ride in and around the music space as well.
Yeah,
he's a different bit of technology.
Yeah, well, it's so great that he got the opportunity to be his own founder for the thing that he was really passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I'd like to talk about the relationship with Pioneer.
Okay.
So it's an interesting storied kind of version. The bit that I know, and there's no doubt much to this, is that you had a partnership for a whole bunch of time. They were the hardware manufacturer. Serato was the software that sat on the hardware. Then that transitioned into a potential acquisition a couple of years ago, which went through a Commerce Commission journey. And then and in the background, they founded Recordbox, being a competitor to Serato. So correct me on the bits that I'm wrong. Tell me about the story about Pioneer. So
Pioneer was not our first hardware partner. Our first hardware partner was a company called Rain. And that's who we found at that 2003 trade show, and they were making DJ mixes, and also church mixes was their other big business. So they were really into their high-end audio mixing hardware.
They were like best of breed at that stage, weren't they?
Yeah, and they had a small cult following for their DJ mixes, and they were just the right fit for us, in terms of culture. And so for many years, they were our only and our exclusive hardware partner. And Pioneer, so the Pioneer company itself, the big audio brand, we never had a relationship with. We had a relationship with an offshoot called Pioneer DJ, which then became Alpha Theta, because I think they only ran with their company name being Pioneer DJ for they were transitioning it away from it for the last few years. So what I wanted to say was the first company that we started working with after Rain was Pioneer, and that was the introduction of the controller. And so, their Pioneer DJ is a brand synonymous with club equipment. The CDJ is theirs. Most clubs have got CDJs in a Pioneer mixer, and it's like club standard. So, working with them was an opportunity for us to broaden into like a wider audience. Now, it was always kind of on our risk radar that they might get into software, and at some point they did. And they produced a piece of software which is remarkably similar to our, Serato DJ. And so rather than panicking, we kept our relationship with them and we kept doing the hardware, and we basically decided to just stay relevant. And even though people were buying Pioneer hardware to go with Serato software, to not be replaced. And, it makes sense. It's kind of like that whole not invented here thing I was talking about earlier. It's like, it makes sense. We're kind of expecting them to try and have a homegrown solution. And they did a pretty good job of it. And it became, it's probably about as popular as ours, in
terms of market share.
The figures that were thrown around in the Commerce Commission inquiry put us both around sort of 30-35%, and that was based on a DJ survey, though it's not real figures, so no one really knows, but probably about the same size as us, and partly they got the home team advantage in terms of you buy the hardware and you use the software that the hardware company makes. But even with that advantage, we still hold our own. So, yes, in some ways, and for the purposes of the inquiry, they considered us to be competing with them in the software game. But for us, it's like, we don't make hardware. We only make software. And we're the premium software brand, and they're the premium hardware brand. And we have always tried to just serve the customer's needs and be relevant and popular in our own right. And so we've tried to stay ahead of the game in terms of technology and always be working, always improving the software so that we have an edge.
What was your defensive or offensive position to take when Alpha Theta released Rekordbox? Did you, for example, diversify? Because you're now sitting across other hardware manufacturers as well, I believe. So Denon, I'm pretty sure, plus some other ones.
Yeah, so we were already doing that. Before Pioneer, we had a partnership with Vestax.
Got it.
Vestax mixers, they did a controller. They did the first sort of the low-end controller with our product. We did an offshoot of the software called Itch, and which then the pro version was called Scratch Live, and the kind of low-end version was called Itch, and then we recombined everything into Serato DJ. And so now, whether you're a pro or a beginner, you've got the same software, but with a reduced set of features if you are on the lower end hardware.
Thanks for listening, and apologies for the interruption. I wanted to share with you that this show is one that we, the team, collectively pour a lot of effort into. There's resources that are involved. We have producers, promoters, and wonderful guests that share their time with us so that you may learn and possibly, hopefully, make some impact on the world as a result of that learning. The only thing I ask of you is go and check out my website. There's a diagnostic tool on there. There's a free downloadable chapter of my upcoming book, remarkably called 2 Commas. And there is some other fascinating resources that I'm not going to tell you about because you need to go to the website to check them out. So thanks for listening, and please continue enjoying the show. In software, it's very difficult to sue because we've got this look and feel concept, which is baked into how we go about any IP protection that you could pursue. And you said that it did kind of look remarkably like the Serato product. And so another one is to diversify, up and down the stack you could acquire. So what were the range of things that you considered doing?
Well, luckily for us, we were already working with multiple other manufacturers, including in music that has a number of brands and now owns the Rain brand. And so we always were mindful to not have all of our eggs in one basket with Pioneer, because they dominated the hardware space, and really making sure that we looked after our other hardware partners was the main strategy. We didn't want to attack, with legal stuff. We didn't want to try and, turn people away from anything. We basically wanted to be the brand that works with all of the hardware and win in the market on quality. And so for us, continuing to focus on reliability, I think, is probably what kept us in the game. The Rekordbox software didn't have the same reputation as ours of reliability, so that's pretty important to a DJ, especially playing live, and so we didn't really do particularly anything specific to, panic about the release of Rekordbox. We just continued on. And they took market share in terms of people using the software. But
the market was growing at a rate of not anyway, so it probably didn't matter.
Yeah.
Your numbers wouldn't, I'd imagine, have been
we
impacted.
didn't suffer a loss. No.
Yeah, got it. Cool.
And the deals that we have with our hardware partners are such that if it's pro hardware, then we get a software license which enables the software to work on their hardware without buying anything from us.
Right.
And then the lower end hardware, you can pay a subscription to Serato to get the full feature list.
Yeah.
And so we still do those deals today. We still have hardware that we do a deal with the manufacturer, and we get their hardware unlocks our software.
Yeah, got it. Okay. Yeah. And at what stage did the original acquisition talks come up?
Well, we started a process. It's almost 3 years ago now. Basically, some of our shareholders wanted to do other things and reduce their shareholding to either 0 or about 3%. And so we basically engaged some what do you call them? Bankers, investment bankers, to put us on the market.
Out of interest, did you go out of New Zealand, or did you find a specific IB that focuses on the high fidelity or the music industry or whatever it might have been?
So we used a local company to help us find the investment bankers.
Okay.
And so we've done. We did a lot of homework. It took us a while to kind of settle on. We did a process before the process to choose our investment banker. And we just found a company called Rain, RAINE, and they, which is funny.
Ironically,
we've
it's the same spelling, right?
Yeah, exactly. We ended up, no, different. RANE is the DJ one,
okay.
and RAINE is the investment bankers. And, they've got offices in New York and London and LA and stuff. And so they're very much international. And their approach and their pedigree with dealing with companies that were more like ours than, your average acquisition, they just felt like a good fit.
Yeah. When you say more like ours than your average acquisition, was that companies in your sector, or was it age and stage, or?
To be fair, it was probably more their attitude and the way that they decided to the way that they presented themselves. But in terms of, they seemed like they were more familiar with music and tech than some of the other companies that we spoke to. So
yeah, got it. Okay.
Yeah. And we were really happy in the end because the process took a really long time, and they always dealt with us really well, and they they didn't start to tap the foot about
Okay.
just accepting what's in front of us.
Yes. So did it seem odd that you had this kind of partnership / competitive relationship with Pioneer, with Alpha Theta, and you engage this investment banker? The process tends to be, who do you think could be interested? Who's in your sector? Who's your competitor? Who's upstream? Who's downstream? Because they represent a strategic acquirer, right? And so did it, when you got to the stage of an offer being presented, were there other parties that were at the table at that stage, or has it just been really focused down to Alpha Theta?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's always two kinds of acquirers, and they're very different to each other. You've got the finance people, like private equity, that kind of thing, or you've got trade buyers and people who are already in the industry. Yep. And so initially we weren't even thinking that one of our hardware partners would be a good fit for us, and because it maybe destabilizes the partnerships with the other ones, and we had those kinds of concerns. And in the end, management team meetings with the private equity options and the people such as Alpha Theta resulted in a strong preference by the actual management team for a company that felt like they were interested in things other than money, and interested in the product, interested in the technology, interested in what Serato could do in the future. Right. And so we did have a great offer from a private equity company, and we also had an offer from Alpha Theta. And Steve and I basically listened to our management team, and they were saying pretty strongly that the private equity questions were very different to the industry questions, and that the Alpha Theta was talking all about what they could do together in the future, whereas private equity was asking about churn and numbers and business maths is what my CEO calls it.
Yeah, good. I like that.
Could this be a possibility? Steve and I didn't consider it at first, and then when the management team were actually very keen on it, we didn't think they'd want to either. But when the management team were keen on it, we realigned ourselves and tried to make it happen.
It's an interesting thing you point out, and I'll highlight it for a second because it's relevant, is that if with the delineation of financial buyer versus, trade buyer, the financial buyer may not be as interested in evolution of product and caring for the customer and success of the customer and success of the people necessarily. They may have some of those things at their interest, but they're probably not going to continue growing the company in the same sector, broadly speaking, in the same way. They'll possibly come in and kind of strip some cost out, maybe to maximize some profit, classic approach from financial buyers.
Yeah, so we weren't speaking to any cutthroat private equity firms that had like a bad history. We were talking to companies that really could have been a fit for us, and led with, how great their previous acquisitions had gone, and were offering to for us to talk to the people that are already acquired, and so I mean, obviously that's the reputation that private equity has, and in a sense, no matter how committed you are to getting a great result for the founders and the company itself, at the end of the day, if the goal is to triple the value of the company and then flip it again, then there's that incentivizes different behavior to a company that's going to just be interested in the long term, beyond 10 years or more horizon. And that's probably just one of the things that's really important to me is, what's Serato gonna be, what's the legacy of Serato going forward in the future. And the deal with Alpha Theta didn't actually involve me being able to keep any of my shares. And so that was also another difficult part of the decision for me. And in the end, I had already agreed at the start of the process that if that was going to be the outcome, that I would not resist it, even though I, had indicated that I didn't, I wasn't ready to leave. so I had to, like I aligned myself with that, and we tried to get the sale done. But of course, as you said,
Comcom.
Comcom came.
So you ended up with the press was a 65 million USD offer at that stage a couple of years ago from Alpha Theta. And so the Comcom journey, when did that raise its ugly head, and what was their rationale?
So we were waiting for the result of the Overseas Investment Office. Obviously, when you have foreign investment, you have to get approval from them. And we had heard from them that they would be sending it through by the end of the week, sort of thing. So we were just waiting for it. It was probably one of the last conditions on the sale. And when it didn't come through, and on the day that we thought it was going to, we got a message from Comcom about, asking us if Commerce Commission approval was one of our conditions, and it hadn't been. We'd never even considered that it would be an issue. And so we thought, oh well, we'll just wait and see. We'll wait for OAO to put their approval through because they're just about out of time, and then we'll deal with this. But then it didn't come through, and then on the last day, it came through, but conditional on Comcom approval, which is unheard of. So Overseas Investment Office got somehow colluding with Comcom, and so I think the concern that the departments had was that we were going to just go ahead and ignore them and go on, without their approval and without them doing an investigation. And we hadn't decided what we were going to do, but it was pretty unusual that the OIO had required anything to do with Comcom. They're supposed to be separate. So, that is the kind of, that week was the first we'd heard of anything. And it turned out that one of our other hardware partners in music had laid a pretty strongly worded complaint, and were very, very keen for us not to be owned by Alpha Theta.
Would have made them the dominant market player.
So the thing that you have to convince the Comcom of is that competition will be substantially reduced.
In New Zealand, though, right?
Word? In New Zealand, yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing that surprised us, right? We do about 360,000 a year in New Zealand, like a day's trade for a supermarket. And so anticipating that Comcom would even be looking at us was not kind of on our radar. And, our lawyers were surprised, and, we got in special Comcom lawyers as well to kind of advise us. And they said, no, this is very unusual.
I believe it was the only time that the Comcom and the OIO have ended up getting together on something ever in New Zealand's history.
It was pretty surprising to our advisors that had happened.
Yeah. I love that you referenced the supermarket, by the way. The least competitive sector in the entirety of New Zealand's living experience is the supermarket chain.
Yeah, well, the hilarious thing is that, when we get to the end of the Commerce Commission process and they were getting ready to give us an answer in the negative, the other things that were happening in other sectors were hilarious, like, in New Zealand tripling their prices and, just all this monopolistic behavior from other markets. And I know that we're a decent sized player in global terms, but in Comcom's jurisdiction, we're a blip, So it was surprising. And look, the thing that we kind of had to be realistic about was that with in music so strenuously objecting and writing very strongly worded letters and things to Comcom, they kind of had to look at it. And so, we were fine with it, but we were just not that happy with the outcome because we thought it was kind of inappropriate for them to step in for the market size that we have.
Yeah.
But, all water under the bridge now.
That's right. I mean, there's a wonderful happy ending to this story.
Well, for us, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that with the Commerce Commission result was that it affected the industry more than it affected us. we knew, well, it affected us because we wasted a year on it, and which was very frustrating.
We were going through the Kiwi negotiations at that stage, and so $300 million exit, big deal for all of us, New Zealand included, and it was referenced in board minutes, and that wasn't the only business that was, Trade Fire was going through a sale process. There was a number of others that were freaking out about it, and rightly so. And so that's putting aside, you mentioned time, but the pain and the effort of DD that you would have had to have gone through to get to that stage, to the sale and purchase agreement. No, that's right. I'm curious just about that investment banking relationship. So ordinarily you tend to have a retainer that needs to be paid, and then there's a fee paid on percentage as well. So you've got lawyers' fees that are being racked up, you've got investment banking fees that are being racked up, and the percentage upon success, hey, that's important, but it's not the fact that you've got this meter that's kind of running in the background. So no doubt it was financially painful as well.
Well, I don't think we had a retainer with our investment bankers. But we were definitely paying a lot of money in lawyers' fees. So we were definitely racking up a big bill. And we were convinced that we were going to get there in the end. And we were, and by the end we realized that it wasn't going to be a yes. But, it is what it is.
Yes.
And the thing for us was that we wouldn't have even signed a deal with Alpha Theta if we thought that they were going to shut down the market. It didn't make financial sense for them to do any of the things that in music were worried about. And that was, the thing we tried to show. And we felt confident and secure that Serato would be able to continue. It would have changed the business somehow. I'm not sure how, but definitely shutting down the competition was not part of their thing, and we had rigorous kind of agreements in place that would financially impact them in very negative ways if they were to try. And we were satisfied that things were going to be good, or we wouldn't have done it. Yeah. For me and Steve, definitely for me, I don't want to speak for him, but for me, it's important to me, the future of Serato. It's like, it's my firstborn.
Indeed. So at that stage, you had the deal that was blocked by the Comcom. It gets killed. There was commentary in the press around it. You don't usually comment in the press, but you did a couple of times. And so at what point did you acknowledge that it was dead? And then what did you do from that moment forward?
Well, we did an interview where right before the announcement, when we were pretty sure it was going to be dead. And so it was pretty much up to the minute when we did that. It wasn't really for any, we weren't trying to change the outcome or do anything about it. We just wanted to, let people know what was going on. There was definitely a lot of people interested in, because there had been a number of articles in National Business Review along the process. And while it was heating up and, lots of letters were flying around. So it was kind of just a way to conclude it and say, look, we don't think we're going to get it now. And if we don't, then it does send a bit of a funny message to the entrepreneur community.
Yeah. Mm. And so when did the ultimate acquirer, which I was looking for a second ago and I don't have on my notes here, so the ultimate acquirer, when did they get brought to the table?
So Tiny is a company that I got somebody forwarded me a tweet by its founder, Andrew Wilkinson. And the tweet was along the lines of, I love New Zealand. And then, gushing about why New Zealand is so great and finishing with, so if you know anyone with a great business in New Zealand, send them my way. And so Tiny is a company that buys wonderful companies. That's what they say on their website.
The private equity?
Kind of.
Right.
They, I guess technically could be put in that category. However, they don't flip. They buy and they hold forever. Right. And their strategy is to make their money back in, the same sort of time frame that you might flip a company, sort of 5 to 7 years, if they've made back in revenue from the company what they put in, then they're happy.
Right.
And if it takes 10 years, they're not super sad. But the idea is to buy a company that's doing really well and don't interfere. When I found out about these guys, we were right at the beginning of the ComCom process, and I thought, oh well, it looks good, but it's kind of too late. We've got the sale going through, and so just put it in the back of my mind. And when we got to the end of the ComCom process, I was like, maybe I should, because we're about to start gearing up for going back out to market and seeing what was there. And the team was pretty fatigued from that process, and so we weren't sure how much of a process we were going to run. We had the backup offer from private equity, and I basically just reached out to them and said, hey, look, our deal's just fallen over. Would you guys be interested? And the founder had been a DJ in the past. The CEO had done some DJing, and the deal guy was, everyone apparently is.
Sounds like it was supposed to happen.
And so they were like, yeah, that sounds great. They'd all heard of us, which is a real bonus, And so we rapidly got them up to speed, yeah.
What I loved about it, we caught up in December at CB's place, and you hinted that there was something that was happening in the background, which was going to be a better deal, and it was a bigger multiple. Sorry, not a bigger multiple. I won't get involved in that just yet, but a better overall number. Plus, you got to keep some shares in the business, and so, if I'm correct, based on our research, the original offer that was agreed upon, 65 million. The second one from Tiny, 100 million. That's a substantial difference, right?
Yeah.
And you get to maintain some equity stake in the business as well. So what was the process of negotiation of acquisition, et cetera, like?
Well, it was pretty straightforward. I think that the results that had come in since the original process had started, and since the deal had been signed previously, they were so great that it was pretty obvious that we were going to be able to command a higher figure. And we had always wanted an offer that was what do you call it? I mean, yeah. 100 or more in the US dollars.
Yes. Desi something or other. I forget the number.
Yeah. I don't know the Greek, but it's that 9 figures.
Yes,
yeah.
It is.
Yeah. And so that was always the dream. And so so the process of getting to that figure was basically, look, this is the number you're going to need to make it happen. We don't need to sell. And, we've also got a backup offer if we do want to sell. So, let's work out all the other details. But I think, you need to kind of hit this level. And, they were like, okay, we'll see what we can do. And they came to the party at 100 mil.
Yeah.
And
like bang on 100 mil. Like was that the number, or was it 101.5 or something? Or
well, it was 95, and then I said, like, guys, it's going to have to be 100. And they're like, okay,
yeah, we're close enough.
And there's an earn-out figure as well that's based on performance and things like that. But that's the top line figure, and we're very happy to break that little. It was a psychological thing as well. It felt good to get the 9 figures.
Yes. What proportion have you retained of your? Because you were like 40% or so, give or take.
36.
36. Yeah.
And so now I'm 25.
25. Yeah. Okay.
So very partial exit for me.
Yeah, very partial.
The acquiring company, Tiny, has 66%.
Okay.
And the other 9% is spread amongst the
management team.
No, the shareholders, the old shareholders.
So
like my business partner Steve has 3%. His mum's deceased estate has 3%.
Right.
And his ex-wife has 3%.
So let's shift gears here.
Yeah.
So I'm not denigrating any of the other amazingly cool software companies to come out of New Zealand, but I put Serato up there with like Letterboxd and Rocket Lab in terms of cool factor, in terms of the software that you were doing. So the segue question here is, do you hope that you might be able to bring some of that cool into politics?
Yeah, that is what I hope.
Tell me more.
Not politics, but one particular party,
The Opportunities Party.
The Opportunities Party. And look, it's no secret that we haven't really had the coolest reputation. We would basically be described by some as policy wonks. Have you heard that term?
Not until now, but
No.
I get what it means.
Yeah.
So in other words, policy nerds kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And look, the people who think they're the smartest people in the room and who, aren't in touch with the average voter. And, we've taken that, I've just joined, but like the party has taken that on the chin and is really committed at the leadership level that we really show our heart, because that's the thing that's been missing is like, we've got policy, great policy, and we've got some very smart people who know a lot of things about policy and evidence-based politics, but do we have the appeal to your average New Zealander who's struggling? And that's really, at the heart of what we're trying to do is address the big problems in New Zealand. And, most people are struggling, it turns out. And, so it's funny for me, talking about this, wealth stuff where most people in New Zealand are struggling to make ends meet. Like I've got cousins that I've helped move to New Zealand from South Africa. I'm half South African, and that country is in big trouble, and so thinking that I would be bringing them somewhere where opportunities are plentiful, and that life would be easy compared with South Africa, I was shocked to kind of discover that even with a $100,000 income, that they're still trying to get their rent paid and get their groceries, and like occasionally asking for more help. And it's an eye opener that people are struggling as hard as they are, for me anyway. I've been super privileged and super lucky to have enough income to always be comfortable. After the noodle days. And so for me, it's like, I've had a big exit, but I'm not going to go and get yachts and trips to Monaco and that kind of stuff. That's not what I want. I want, and this is what I've always wanted. Like when I first retired, I was like, great, now what do I do? And it's like, oh, my friends are still working. And so I started trying to advise and help friends to being entrepreneurial and maybe doing their own kind of thing where they maybe didn't have to work 40 hours a week.
How'd it go?
Some people, look, I still get people asking me for advice on their startup and that kind of thing. And I love doing that.
Yes.
And, it's a tough game. It takes perseverance, and it takes more than an idea. It takes persistence and excellent execution.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the advice I normally give is like, you need to bring something to the table. You can't just have an idea, and you need to work hard at it for many years. Don't expect to make it in a year. It's like, expect to be 5 years.
Yeah. Minimum.
Minimum.
Yeah.
To turn a corner. And so, most New Zealanders aren't going to be doing anything entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
And so my firmly held belief is that if you're working full time at an ordinary job, even minimum wage, you should be able to support your family easily. You shouldn't need two incomes. You shouldn't need, 3 jobs. You should be able to do that on one full-time job, even at minimum wage. And if you look at our history in this country, and probably mirrors a lot of the world, but my dad bought his first house for $19,000, and his dad was a taxi driver, single income family, and he owned his own house. If you imagine, a taxi driver with, just working normal taxi driver wages, owning their own home without some kind of money assistance from somewhere else, it's like you can't even save the deposit nowadays. Do you know what I mean? And so I think that if you work a job like that, even if minimum wage, you should be able to buy your own house. You should be able to save up. You shouldn't have to pay most of your money out in rent. And if you look at the ratio of rent and mortgages and house prices to salaries, that has gone the wrong direction for 30 years straight. And one of our biggest problems in New Zealand is that we have convinced ourselves that property is an investment.
Residential property specifically.
Yeah. And that's a problem.
Yeah.
Just if you think about it logically, if the value of property across the board is going up more than inflation, then it's becoming unaffordable over time.
Yeah,
it's now unaffordable.
Yeah.
It's simple mathematics.
Patently.
If the value of the money is going up with inflation, and your hopefully wages are going up with inflation, and it's basically creating the next feudal system where a small percentage of people own all of the property and everyone else is paying for the privilege to occupy their piece of New Zealand. And so we do have a high percentage of home ownership.
It's about 45%, I believe. It's dropping year on year on year.
Yeah.
So the New Zealand home ownership dream is still there, but the reality is that
I think it's about if it's not your own home, I think if it's property, it might be more like closer to 60% or something. Because a lot of people rent and then they own a property somewhere that they don't live.
Yeah,
because
I might be
they can afford
quoting
it.
home ownership occupation figures. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not sure the exact percentages, but I know there's a decent amount of people who do own some property.
Mm.
So that's something that can't continue. That's something that's unsustainable. And so and it's a difficult problem to solve because you've got a lot of people who have already paid too much for their property. And so you can't, do things that will kill the property values of all the people who are, because then you're just shifting the problem. So it's, there's some difficult problems that we need to solve. But one of them is that housing is way too expensive.
Mm.
And it should be something like a right or it should be accessible that you can own a piece of New Zealand if you, work hard.
And if you can't, then at least afford your rent.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So quite different paradigms. I'll jump in and add something to that mix as well. So Henry Ford famously in the 1930s doubled his staff's wages. And this was very much the working class person. But we were not long beyond the days of serfdom and people moving out of the fields and into the cities. And so people were treated appallingly. They had 14 to 16-hour work days, 6 days a week. And so Henry Ford invented or conceived of the idea of the production line, but then he also doubled people's wages. And he very simply said, I want them to be able to afford to buy my cars. So the logic was quite straightforward and it was very effective.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we had this great boom up until the 1950s, 1960s, but then since then, the wealth has been getting more and more and more concentrated down to a small proportion of people. I'm very open about the fact that I have the same belief that no one individual, no one family should own more than one, maybe two homes. Commercial industrial property, absolutely. That's a business asset and you pay tax on it and you pay capital gains tax on it. And it's treated like the income producing, appreciating asset that it is. Whereas residential property in New Zealand, famously, one of the things that Labor enacted was to put in the Bright Line test, which essentially was a tax on non-primary residential properties if you held them for less than 10 years. And then Barfoot and Thompson and Bailey's paid $1 million each to the national government in political donations. And the very first thing that they did was remove that.
Yeah.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
I mean, that's bribery, right?
Yeah.
That is literally you are paying to get an outcome. We call it lobbying, where people pay to get a rule, a law enacted, which benefits them. And that's exactly what's gone on. So we're back to that place again, albeit that property prices haven't gone up. So within the Opportunities Party, I'm guessing this is one of the core tenets of the problem that you're trying to solve. Inequality could be what it's called. Lack of affordability of core resources could be another name for it. What are kind of some of the solutions that you're conjuring up, that you're cogitating on, which could resolve this over time? It's not a quick and easy problem. It's a systemic problem. They're the hardest problems to solve. So what's some of the ideas of solutions?
So we're very big on massive tax reform. And tax, the way that it works, hasn't changed a lot. And one of the things that is problematic about it is that the very wealthy pay a pretty small amount of tax compared to the increase in wealth that they enjoy every year. And people at the very bottom end are paying a lot of tax. You know, once you include GST and you include everything that someone who on a low income is paying to the government as a percentage, it's massive and it's debilitating. So one of the things, and our welfare system is also kind of broken. I personally know many people who are out of work, and if they get offered some work, they have to turn most of it down, because if it's only a little bit, then the penalty for their welfare is so much that they would be working for $2 an hour.
They'll be worse off.
They'd be worse off if they take a little bit of work. And so when you have a benefit that is conditioned on you not getting any income, you're incentivized to not getting any income. And so that's broken. And like I said about home ownership and property and the wealthy not getting taxed, is these are kind of like the problems. And one of the proposed solutions from the Opportunities Party is a land value tax. So if you look at the unimproved value of a piece of land, you would, under this system, you would pay a percentage of that value as a tax each year. And what that means is that if you are owning your own home, you would probably still pay less tax when you take into consideration all of our other tax policies as well. And the idea is that if you own your own home and you have a job and you are working at an average income or less, that you would be paying a lot less tax. But if you own 10 properties, it's going to be a bit of a different story. And so for the average person, a land value tax wouldn't increase the amount of tax that they would be paying, but it would redistribute the tax that's being paid to people who are enjoying this very lucrative way of multiplying your wealth of just basically buying property. Yeah. And, when I was younger, property was booming and there was seminars all the time telling you how to do, like they were advising getting 10 credit cards to get a deposit for a house and, own 10 houses within 2 years basically, and just keep getting more debt and keep multiplying and, negatively gearing and, all this crazy stuff that they were doing at the time. It doesn't work quite as well nowadays to do something like that, but still, the way that property works in New Zealand, and like you said, like the real estate agents are very, very interested in the value of property always going up. It definitely benefits a small number of people, and it makes things very hard for a large number of people. Whereas, and the reason why, we're kind of interested in possibly a land value tax as opposed to a capital gains tax is it's very, very easy to implement.
Right.
The value of every property in the country is already in a database.
Yes.
And who owns it is in the same database.
Yes.
So it would be as easy to administer as would be the easiest tax to administer. We have tax brackets that start at 0. income. If you earn under 14,000, you're still getting taxed. I think in Australia they got rid of that. I think the bottom tax bracket is 0 rated, which that's a great step in the right direction. Why should you tax someone whose total income is below the poverty line or even below a cost of living figure? There's the possibility of a universal basic income.
UBI, I was going to ask about that.
That's something that a lot of people misunderstand. And it's the main purpose of it is that it creates a backstop. It creates the bottom is now not poverty. It's it's at a level where you can still survive. And the idea of it is that you don't have to be income tested. You don't have to qualify. You don't have to prove that you're trying to find a job, or you don't have to do any of that stuff. And consequently, you don't have, all of the overhead and all of the expense of hiring a whole lot of people to try and stop people from getting their benefit and testing whether they should or whether they deserve it and all of that. Whereas it's just a basic right to be able to not starve on the streets, And the idea of a universal basic income is that everyone in the country has it's basically a tax break. We shift the 0 point up a little bit. And so if you're earning I think, if you're earning quite a low income, like on the 30K kind of level or whatever, you would end up paying no tax. If you're earning less than that, you'd get a bit of money. And if you're earning a lot more, you just have a slightly less tax to pay. And it's kind of the way I think about it is when a business reports their income, they take expenses off first. But people don't get to do that.
No, right.
You pay for everything. And so if a business only pays tax on its profits, why shouldn't there be a number which is basic, cost of living, where that part of your income is untaxed, and you're paying tax based on the excess above what it costs for you to live? To me, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's a beautiful explanation.
And I like to kind of frame it that way for people, because a lot of people have expressed confusion about UBI and how it could possibly work and that kind of thing. And obviously something like that needs to get paid for. And, things like the way that the wealthy don't get taxed on, like my sale, for example.
Right.
It's untaxed.
Yeah.
I don't have to pay any tax on the money that I got from my company, even though at some point the company was worth 0. Yeah. And at this point of selling, it's worth, $100 million. And obviously I don't own the whole thing, but I own a decent chunk, and I sold a chunk of it. And so for me, I'm like, how can I use this money to make sure that people who are earning a lot of money from the efforts of a whole lot of other people can contribute a fair share? And look, I don't have a problem with capitalism. I'm not a communist. I think that people should be able to be rewarded handsomely for doing great and amazing things. But I also think that we need to recognize that there's a lot of people involved in those kinds of successes. I've got 160 staff, and there's a whole lot of people who are looking after their household at home that aren't getting paid anything to do that, and looking after raising the next generation of New Zealanders. And there's just a whole lot of unappreciated labor that contributes to everyone who makes a lot of money. And we've still got this hangover from the 80s of thinking of these entrepreneurs and business people or whatever as these superheroes that are saving the world. They're getting paid a lot of money for it. And if the super wealthy have to pay a bit more tax to make sure that New Zealand actually has a future, then that to me is a really great outcome. So by by joining the Opportunities Party and promoting these policies, I am personally looking to disadvantage myself in the future financially. And I'm really looking for more people like me. I'm looking for who else is wealthy and wants to contribute to this goal of making sure that we have a future. Because there is no future if people can't afford to live, and if less and less people are even having kids because it's hugely expensive and it's massively difficult, and we don't have a lot of support for that. So we need to move towards a future where we are serving humanity, instead of corporate interests and incentivizing money to attract more money and things like that. And so that's I'm passionate about making a better New Zealand, and I think the Opportunities Party is the only one that has the policies that are even interested in changing the status quo. The main parties, even the Labour Party, and that it doesn't matter if it's left or right or whatever, they're still, like you said, pandering to the people that give them the most money. And the kind of criminal kind of way that we have our property system set up has the inevitable outcome of making property unaffordable for most people. And that's obviously a big important thing that I keep noticing. And it's something like I try to help people that I know to get out of the rent trap and own property, just because having almost everybody paying rent to a few people is like a modern version of feudalism, and I just I don't like it.
Yeah, I fundamentally agree with you. You look back over history and the times where the divide has been at the level that it was about 5 years ago, which was the largest it's been in modern history. There's always been a revolution that's happened. That's an uprising. That's the majority kind of taking control, power back. We haven't had one for quite a long time, certainly not in this part of the world, or in the Western world. And so if you look in Australia, for example, they have capital gains tax because it makes sense, right? The Aussie banks are behind our property market, as they are the Australian property market, by the way. If you look who's only really made money out of this, it's the Aussie banks that have made the most money out of this explosion, because it's been 25 years. So in 2000, if you go back, and anyone watching or listening to this, I'd encourage you to go back and chart property growth over time. Up until the year 2000, it was pretty flat. It was like inflation. That was about the level that it was rising. And then in about 2000, we changed some regs. The Aussie Bank started to lean into New Zealand. They made capital more available. They pushed the rates down. The OCR, they got involved in that. And all of a sudden, it just starts to go up by 7 to 10% a year. That's doubling every 7 years. So it's become just, totally agree, patently unaffordable. You mentioned that you're interested in other folk, if they're around, that might be moneyed people that could be involved. I guess they'd look you up on LinkedIn. AJ Wilderland would be the right place to find you to have a conversation about the Opportunities Party. Yeah,
there would be one place. I'm right now kind of putting the pitch together for how a wealthy person gets their head around disadvantaging themselves financially for the future of New Zealand.
I'm looking forward to that pitch too, AJ. It's going to be a lot of fun.
If there are people listening who have, some figures to put towards something that's really meaningful, the Opportunities Party is a really great place to donate money to. We are going to run a really big campaign this year. We're back. We've got a new team. We've got 3 new board members, and our political strategy team is firing on all cylinders. So we basically recognise that we need to be a political party with a think tank rather than a think tank with a political party attached.
Got to flip the script a little bit. Keep the smart people there.
And look, we have to play the game, but we don't want to do mudslinging or taking the opponents down or any of that stuff. What we want to do is we want to tell our story, and instead of going down the rabbit hole of trying to explain our policies, that
was the history, right?
It's kind of what we kind of do in the past. it's really reach people and make them a promise and say, if you can get past your apathy about what's going on in politics and rebel against the system by voting for the Opportunities Party, we promise that we will make life better for 99% of New Zealand. And, the other 1% don't need their life to be better.
I'm going to take a guess that the idea is not to storm into power with a clear majority this time, but rather get above the threshold. Is that the intention for the
I'm not ruling out that possibility.
Okay, I love it. Shoot for the stars.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'd love to. If you look at the history of politics in any country, including New Zealand, there's usually two parties, but it's not always the same party. There have been several flips, and it's just too long ago to be in anyone's memory. But I definitely don't rule out the possibility of the Opportunities Party becoming in power. But we don't need to do that to affect change.
Yes.
At the moment we've got we're noticing that people are responding well to this observation of the cost of pendulum politics, swinging left, swinging right. You use the example of like Labour bringing in Bright Line and then National taking it out, and in this latest election, it's really become obvious that it's not just about National and Labour, because there's more extreme parties that have enough influence and get to have their issue seen in Parliament that makes the swing even more extreme. And so New Zealand doesn't need more of that extreme swinging. We need someone to actually stabilize that the differences between the two. And, our approach has always been evidence-based, and the policies that we design are ones that we truly believe will work if given the opportunity. And we don't like, just like the average New Zealander, we don't like seeing money wasted on taking apart what the last guys just put in place.
Mm-hmm.
And, politics is divisive these days, and, we've got echo chambers and we've got people, throwing their hands in the air about all sorts of moral panics. And, we want to be the reasoned voice in the room. We want a seat at the table so that we can bring the concerns of average New Zealander to the table. And that's why we've just launched this campaign now called Citizens' Voice, which is an opportunity. It's kind of like jury duty for politics. And the idea is that a few people get selected who across a wide range of, diverse range of people, and they go in a room for a few days and talk about like actual issues of that are important right now, and we get to a place where some kind of conclusion is drawn, and then parties like ours are very interested in how do we implement that? How do we put in place things that people actually need? And so bringing democracy into democracy seems like a good,
It seems sensible in this day.
It's kind of like our first kind of sort of step out into the public arena for this cycle. And, we've got a few other campaign pushes that are coming up in the future, and we intend to make a really good run and get Opportunities Party into Parliament this year.
I love it.
Next year.
If you look back over the impactful governments that we've had in New Zealand since we've been around, similar demographic, is that perhaps Longy in the 1980s, the reform that needed to be driven into the New Zealand economy, Clark during the early noughties, kind of settling New Zealand down, Key during the teens, they were actually relatively centrist in their approach, in their politics. But just the way the world's moved over the last few years is that we've been trying to get a wedge divided in between us, like hidden between us.
Yeah.
And if you look back in New Zealand's history, one of the reasons that we're centrist is that we kind of came to the other side of the world from wherever we were, talking about the Western settlers, obviously not our Indigenous, the Māori people. But we came from the other side of the world, they came from the other side of the world as well, and they kind of largely had to work together to make it work. because there was a lot of environmental factors, a lack of resources, a lack of people to be able to make all these things work. And so just over the last kind of decade, maybe decade and a half, we've had this globally, especially, and now it's coming down to New Zealand, this wedge that's getting driven between us. And I love the fact that you're taking this kind of stance for the centre. Bit of a DJ joke to part this bit of the conversation before I ask a personal question. So which is harder? Getting two DJs to agree upon a set list, or getting two politicians to agree upon a climate policy?
Which is easiest or hardest?
Which is hardest?
I think the politicians. Probably.
Yeah. That would make sense. Yeah. So if you don't mind a parting question, there's two that I've got. The first is that you were AJ Burtonshaw.
Yes.
And you've become AJ Wilderland. Were you just sick of being Burtonshaw, or was
no, not at all.
Yeah.
So I have married into the name, technically. So what happened is my wife and I, my now wife, decided that rather than we wanted our kids to have the same surname as us. We didn't have kids yet, but that's was the idea.
That's the dream.
And we thought that choosing a new name together would be a really interesting way to, start our clan. And so we spent months considering lots of different names, and we ended up with Wilderland, or Wilderland, as we like to say it.
Yes.
And it's kind of a mix of wilderness and Wonderland.
Yes.
That's kind of the vibe that it kind of, and where we like to be a bit nature focused, and we care about the environment and things like that, and believe in magic, and so how we implemented it was that before we got married, Charlotte changed her name by deed poll. And then I signed the papers when we got married to change my name by marriage.
Oh, nice.
I just wanted to, use the thing that came into law some decade or two ago that allowed, because it used to be that only women could change their surname. And then obviously somebody updated that.
Yes.
And I always thought it would be great to use it.
Yes.
And even though we're going to a new name, yeah.
Yes. Vaughan from Vent did a similar thing, took on Melanie's name, and then I believe, I don't actually know the story, he's yet to come on the show, but about the Vaughan Ferguson, his current surname. So maybe it's a tech genius.
Well, my business partner Steve did the same thing.
Interesting.
He was Steve Hook, and he and his wife became Wests.
Great, I love it.
Yeah.
I must conjure up what I would think of a cool surname for me to be. We were at a restaurant one night on New Year's Eve in Sydney, and the waitress asked us what our characters were. We dressed up as something or other, and the only name that came to my mind was Sir King Blade. I don't know why. So that's a standing joke in our household now when
Sir
I'm
King
being
Blade?
imperious. Yeah, Sir King Blade when I'm being imperious.
Yeah.
So the alternate career question.
Okay.
So if you hadn't gone into software development, software engineering, and then creating an incredible company in Serato, building it for most of your professional life, would the alternate career that would have brought you deep satisfaction, and I know at this stage you're not standing for the Opportunities Party, but rather on the executive of the party, but would the alternate career potentially have been politics? I'm putting words in your mouth. If it wasn't either of those things, what could the alternate, deeply satisfying career choice have been?
It probably wouldn't have been politics. I don't think that, look, I'm still not that impressed with politics. I just really have a strong urge to fix what's broken, and it's the most broken. So it probably wouldn't have been politics. Yeah, I could have been interested in music, to be fair, and obviously ended up in music software. I had a digital band with my best friend in high school. So that
can you DJ now?
I can.
You can, right? You don't read very often though.
No, I DJed to a crowd one time at Burning Man.
Amazing.
Yeah. And just to be able to kind of say that I'd done it.
Tick the box.
Yeah, tick the box. Yep. DJ to a crowd. But so I can, but I don't. And It's so hard to, so hard to say. Like, I think, look, I started programming computers when I was 10. So the idea of doing something with tech was probably hardwired.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
Yeah. Love it. AJ, rich, varied, fascinating conversation. I wish you just the best with whatever form the move into the political sphere takes you. And I'm really grateful for you taking the time to come on the show today.
Thanks.
Thank you. If you enjoy these episodes, I hope you do. I love filming them, and the guests always say what a great and often cathartic experience it is for them. Then please do like and share. Hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm open to connect requests, and occasionally get emails from people as well asking me about my experience around certain subjects. So please do like and share, and continue to follow the show. I really appreciate your ears.